It's Ladefoged. Okay? Repeat after me. Ladefoged. No, good. The do's and don'ts of digital outsourcing. That previous session was a perfect segue into this. And before I get started, in the beginning, Ryan told you to use a hashtag called FlowNYC2023. I need you to help me to do something completely different during this session, because I happen to be the father of 3, and they believe that their dad is the most annoying, irritating, stupid guy on earth. And when I said I'm going to Flow, so I'm going to New York, I'm based in Copenhagen in Denmark, then they said, yeah, what are you doing there? I'm actually doing a presentation, I said, and they were like, what? You? It's like, because they can't imagine that I can say anything that would be remotely interesting, right? And on top of that, they find me unbelievably boring. So I would like very much if you, during this presentation, would take some pictures, right? Upload them to social media, right? Tag me and use a hashtag, your dad is super cool. Okay? Would you do that, please? Right? And during this session, I'll be talking about a lot of transparency and trustworthiness, but right now, I don't care if you lie through your teeth, right? So hashtag, your dad is super cool. I'd like that. Good? No? The do's and don'ts of digital outsourcing. Well, first of all, like we heard before, the previous session, there are numerous reasons to outsource. At Pixelz, we outsource several things. A lot of our finance stuff is outsourced, payroll, for instance, stuff like that. And on the other hand, and we also outsource part of our production, actually, to an external vendor. And on top of that, we're also, by definition, running a company where we're being used as an outsourcing partner. So we get a bit of both sides of this. But if you look at the traditional way of outsourcing, if you look how things work traditionally, then when people really started outsourcing, it was very much about traditional physical products that were being outsourced for production. So it was very transactional based. It was very much based on cost cutting, right? That was like why you started outsourcing. But those things have started to change, and that means that we're getting into like a different era of outsourcing. And some of those things that are changing are very, very much driven by technology. First of all, if we think back a couple of years, we had something called COVID-19 and the whole pandemic, and that meant that a lot of companies, they started introducing new pieces of software to actually handle people working remotely. On top of that, many companies were forced to not having people at the office. So they actually found out that, well, not having people at the office, that it actually works pretty well. So that means that those two things in combination has moved and fueled that we've started to outsource processes that we didn't process, or that we didn't outsource previously. And here I'm just going to this quote here. This is taken from a global outsourcing survey that's done by Deloitte, and it was made in 2022. And I'll read out here. Rather than leveraging third-party vendors to reduce cost, as was the norm in 2020, organizations are using third parties to tackle their greatest challenges, such as protecting their business and keeping up with rapid technological advances. And this is a huge change that Deloitte, they make this survey every year, that they saw over only over 2 years. So the way we're outsourcing and the way we're looking at different things that we can possibly outsource has changed dramatically over the last couple of years. If you do smart outsourcing, then it will give you numerous different benefits, like it was also mentioned in the previous session. First of all, if you outsource things that are not necessarily your core business, then that allows you to spend even more resources on developing what is actually your core business. And then you can outsource the things that are not your core business, but it's the core business of other companies. So you get a tremendous win-win situation from that. Also, it's a way to access the right talent at the right time when you need it, without necessarily having to building a department, hiring a lot of people and all of that. And it also allows you to test and implement new technologies in a more agile way than if you had to build things from scratch every time. And that allows you, of course, to build scalable processes and to build scalable teams, because you're not necessarily dependent on only yourself and the volume that you might have. So, and that of course brings me to the last one here, that is removing bottlenecks and thereby reducing lead times. I think, at least when we're talking to our customers, time to site, turnaround time they're pretty important things. So sometimes, we can cut that to a third or a fourth or whatever by using someone that's a specialist at doing a certain thing. That has a huge advantage to your business. But then the problem is, how do you find the right partner? And that's something we've been doing right a couple of times. We've also done it wrong sometimes. And there are some learnings from that. And based on that, and the new way of outsourcing, Deloitte has actually also, in this survey, they've gathered some insights, and I'd like to share with you. One of those things is that the top two one here, transparency and trustworthiness, they're now on top of the chart when it comes to qualitative aspects used to assess a possible outsourcing partner. They weren't a couple of years ago, so that has completely changed the game. And in order to just talk a bit about transparency and trustworthiness, I have a little exercise I'd like to do with you. How often are you late to work? I'd like you to answer this question, right? Help me along here. How many of you would prefer not to answer that question? Yeah. How many of you would say you are never late for work? Katrine, I have some colleagues here. Good. I hope the rest of you were telling the truth. How many of you are occasionally late for work? Yeah, that's the biggest part in here. How many of you are consistently late for work? Good. There's a couple of honest people here. Now, let's imagine that now you're hiring someone for your team, and you have two candidates, and they're one-to-one exactly the same. Competences, whatever, exactly the same. But to that question, how often are you late for work? One preferred not to answer, and the other one said, I'm consistently late for work. How many of you would hire the person who prefer not to answer the question? How many would hire the one that says, I'm consistently late for work? Okay, you would hire the one that's consistently late for work. Good. That's interesting, because that's actually on par with the survey that's done by one of the very big recruitment companies. And why is that? Because if you actually answer that you're consistently late to work, at least you're being honest about it. And when you're honest about something, you can start working with it. If you prefer not to answer, what are you hiding, right? So that trustworthiness and that transparency is just exceptionally important. In this report, Deloitte, they also, they've come up with 5 things that you always need to consider in terms of finding that right partner when you do digital outsourcing. And these are steps that we also use at Pixelz, and it works. I can tell you that. So those 5 things are, and you need to always consider these when you move into digital outsourcing. One is know your goals. The second is internal team expectations. The third is two-way communication. The fourth is critical is okay. And the fourth is compliance and due diligence. And I'll just quickly run over those. First of all, when you start looking for an outsourcing partner and you go into that process, it's extremely important that you are 100% aware of what problem am I actually trying to solve? What am I actually trying to gain from this? And when you think that you have, okay, we're trying to do this, then do yourself that favor, that divide it by two, and see, am I actually just thinking about what it looks like on the surface, or am I down, where we're actually looking at the very critical things in order to achieve what we actually want? So be extremely detailed about this, and then set goals, right? So you're certain about what you want to achieve, and communicate them internally and with your partner. I think communication was one of the big topics in this previous session as well. So communicate those goals and communicate, the KPIs, etc. very, very clearly. The next is internal team expectations. Of course, I think that was one of the big topics previously as well. That is about commitment and about getting people motivated and engaged around working with an outsourcing partner. So you need to be extremely transparent in what you're doing. And if people really understand what it is you're trying to achieve, then you have that opportunity to create an actual ecosystem where you have that internal partner and your internal system working like seamless, hand in hand. The next thing is about two-way communication. Back in the days, when we were outsourcing just physical production, it was pretty much a one-way street, right? We dictated what we wanted. They produced it, and we got some containers back. When we're into digital sourcing, it's a completely different ballgame. And it's extremely important that everyone knows exactly what their responsibility is in the process, what they're supposed to do, and what it is we're expecting from them. So that two-way communication is super, super important. And then another thing that they mentioned in the previous session as well is that critical is okay. I'll even go as far as say critical is needed, right? If we look at how we do things at Pixelz, when we outsource something, we do it for a reason. And it doesn't matter if it's in our production or if it is some finance thing regarding transfer pricing or whatever. We outsource because we believe someone can actually do this job better, more efficient, or whatever than we're able to. So imagine that if they're not being critical, if they're just saying yes, 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 no, you need to educate us, right? They need to demand things from us because that's the way we develop together with them, and that's the way we actually benefit of having an outsourcing partner that hopefully knows more about a specific area that we do ourselves. That's so reason for outsourcing. The next thing is about compliance. That's a boring topic. To me, especially the first one is a little boring. Data and security. But there's just that one thing that when we're talking digital outsourcing, then we're typically talking about sending things back and forth to one another. By default, that means that we are on the internet. That also, by default, just holds a lot of risks regarding, cybersecurity, everything else. So that thing is just something that needs to be nailed. The next thing is about corporate social responsibility, because even if we're talking about digital outsourcing, there are still people behind it. There's an actual company that does something for you. So there's people involved. And I'm personally, at Pixelz, we work with some of the biggest brands in the fashion industry. I've been with the company for 5 years, right? And I think you know a bit about some of those shitstorms and things that's been going on out there. Only two times in 5 years, right? And remember, we're working with numerous of the biggest most high-end fashion companies in the world. 2 times have we had an on-site audit at our offices in Asia. 2 times. I don't understand why that doesn't happen all the time. And in all the contracts we're signing, we're signing that at any given time, anyone can just show up in our office and go do an on-site audit. Yeah, fine. Never done. I don't understand that. And you would be surprised about some of the things you see out there, right? We do that audit ourselves when we pick partners. You would be surprised. There's a lot of work to do there. And in my mind, we have a big responsibility when it comes to this. The next thing is, of course, sustainability. And that's a given these days, right? But it's pretty seldom that anyone are asking us, what is the CO2 footprint of retouching an image? Not very many cares about that. We can actually answer that question, but not very many cares. But still, it should be part of that whole compliance thing that goes on. When you've been through these different processes and these different steps that I've mentioned here, then you have a platform where you have an optimal chance of having a successful relation with a digital outsourcing partner, regardless of what kind of outsourcing, what kind of operation you're outsourcing. But I would say one of the most important things at all to learn and to pay attention to when you run through that process is, what is it? What kind of company is it actually you're working with? What kind of culture do they have? Because if you're outsourcing a critical operation, you need to find someone that culturally matches, or else I guarantee you will have clashes over and over and over again. And the best contract is the one that's in the drawer and never ever looked at. We have a saying at Pixelz: the second someone needs to pull out a contract, we're done. That is not the way things should be working. And that has to do very much indeed with that cultural fit and cultural match between the two organizations that are working very, very closely together. So, cultural match, maybe even above everything else. Cool. Thanks.
All right. Now it's time for a little...
Am I not supposed to give you this?
You are supposed to give me that, thank you. Huh? Now it's time for some questions. So let's see. We'll start off with how to identify the right or almost right partner without going into the deep research and testing. As there are many tools, it's essential to shortlist first.
Yeah. I can tell you what we do. When it's important and it's a critical operation that we're outsourcing, we do on-site audits. I want to see who we're dealing with. At the end of the day, it's my responsibility. So I want to see and I want to know who I'm dealing with. I want to look them in the eye. So that's one thing. Another thing we always do is references, right? And that's back to the critical is okay. I mean, avoid all the yes companies. Because seriously, when we're making a pilot with someone we'd like to work with or whatever, I mean, anyone, any company, right, can take their top people and throw on a certain project for a couple of weeks or a month or two and just deliver top-notch quality. And that's not really what we're looking for. We're actually looking for the ones who can deliver in the long run, right? I mean, so we do pretty serious testing, and then we do references, mm-hmm. and we look people in the eye. And I'm not talking about Zoom or whatever, Google Meet. I'm talking look them in the eye.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Has there ever been a scenario when you've discovered outsourcing is not right for a client?
Yes.
Tell us about it. Come on, man.
No, but I see lunch is getting ready, okay?
We want names.
But seriously, yes. And I think it's important. There was a question in the previous session here, right? If something goes wrong, what do you do to make the best of it? I actually think it's super important to Sometimes you do make mistakes. We've done mistakes in picking a partner. What we do is we pull back. We don't fight a battle where we have an idea that this is such an uphill battle that we're never going to succeed in the way we actually want it to. We pull back. And it's the same, sometimes we just, when you're an outsourcing partner, we at Pixelz, we're super niche. And we're absolute specialists. We actually run around and say we're the best in the world at doing exactly what we do. And sometimes we run into customers that, where we thought they were within that bucket of what we do, but they fall out. They didn't. And it turns out that our systems, the way we integrate to us, it just doesn't bring that partnership what we thought it would be. And then even though we're saying goodbye to revenue, and I'm not super enthusiastic about that, but you know what? It pays off in the long run to say, listen, it's not going to work. We can't do it. We need to pull out. That's just being honest about it. And also because we actually have a brand to protect. And if we insist on doing may I say shitty words? Yeah, good. For a certain, it's damaging to the brand and to everything that we stand for. So we actually pull out.
Something else that we talk about fairly often is the difference between being a vendor and being a partner. And I'm curious out there, like whenever you are outsourcing, are you referring to the companies that you outsource to as vendors or as partners? I mean, do you make a conscious decision in there being a difference there? And if you do, what are the criteria? I mean, do you refer to some as vendors and some as partners? Because, one of the things that we really advocate is these are partnerships, because we are solving an issue, and at the same time, we couldn't solve that issue without the client partner on the other end. And so that's the way we look at it and why we also have that contract approach. So
there's actually two pretty...
Colleen Moore says, what is the carbon footprint that is created when retouching an image?
Yes, good question. You see, I'm not a specialist in carbon emissions and how to calculate that, but I do know a little bit about it. When you're talking carbon emissions, you have scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, right? And it depends on what you produce yourself, what's produced when you do your actual product, and then, distributing the product. So you can choose to include different things when you're talking about carbon footprint. And it's a pretty good question. What's created, what kind of footprint when you're retouching an image? First of all, we have quite many employees. We commute around 5,000 miles every day. That's carbon footprint. If we do not include that in our carbon emission calculations, who are we fooling? So that's something that we include, for instance. Then we have a lot of technology, ABS, and so on and so forth. Amazon is not necessarily the most transparent company in the world when it comes to carbon footprint, but stuff like that we include as well. So we include everything that goes into running our business and not just retouching an image. And what we actually also include is we know the average lifetime, or we estimate the average lifetime of an image that we send out of production. We know pretty much how long time is it online, and then we can calculate, okay, how much space does that take up on a server? What does it take, energy to run a server? And then we can actually include that in the whole carbon calculation as well. So when you do business with someone who does that, then it actually helps the companies that we work with reduce their carbon footprint because we're offsetting the actual use of the image. There's a ton of things that goes into that carbon footprint that is created when you retouch an image. Of course, it's very different from running a factory where you do a physical product, right? But just remember the 5,000 miles a day, right? That's carbon footprint. And they don't use electric scooters in Hanoi yet.
Is that why so many people in the Copenhagen office ride bikes to work?
They do, some of them.
All right, and then, last question here. Do the companies you work with do audits prior to signing the contract?
It's the 2 times we've done it. First of all, sometimes it's an amendment whenever we do a contract, right? And that's fine. We fill out and we do our check boxes and so on and so forth. But it is always before signing the contract, always. It is needed to move into contract signing. We just had and that's a little, we just had the company called Kima that works on behalf of LVMH Group in Paris do an on-site audit for us. And one thing that's a little special when we're talking about traditional outsourcing and digital outsourcing was that we actually believe we run a pretty decent operation in Asia. And we failed that audit. And I was like, what? How can we fail? I mean, we pay so much. And then I found out I had to read the different regulations that we were, held up against. And it turned out we were being audited the same way as if we had a physical production. If we ran a building, a construction site, or if we were building ships. So one of the things we failed on was that we didn't have enough, emergency stations with Band-Aid where people could rinse their eyes and stuff like that. And I was like, but listen, the office we run, it could be lawyers or accountants or whatever. And so, well, why? But we said, beep. And then we bought those emergency stations. So now in the offices in Hanoi and Da Nang, now they can walk around and rinse their eyes if they need it, right? But at least now we're compliant. And that is a process that happens prior to. It's quite simply just part of the process when we're dealing with procurement with companies like that. And it's needed before we even go into the contract base. Good?
Awesome.
We're over
will
time.
You please thank your kids for outsourcing you to us for entertainment? That would be great. And everybody give Thomas a big round of applause. Thank you.